Thank you. Sorry for having you waiting for a few minutes. So yeah, so this is the title, and then there is another title that says how I spent 5 years to get papers published. So I got my PhD in 2020, but I finished up writing in 2019. So it's been 5 years since then. And then spending 5 years to get papers published is like too long, I would say, or I have to say, especially for students who have like 3 years or 4 years, like fixed terms. But anyway, there have been 5 years and there have been something. So I will talk through what was happening. Yeah. So I'm currently at NII, and then this talk is like based on joint work and work advised by these people. So I'm from the field of software science, and in software science, one big theme of research is to build trustable software or help developing trustable software, and then people do verification of systems that execute programs, and then like as an example of systems, we call like term rewriting system or graph rewriting system that looks like so it's supposed to be an animation. So, or we can abstract away and then see both term rewriting systems and graph rewriting systems as automata. So, and then, what about verification? So specifically, I work on providing a mathematical proof of what's called behavioral equivalence between programs. So what's behavior equivalence? So I think many people know model checking. So in model checking, we have a system and a specification, and then we want to prove that a system satisfies the specification. But to prove behavior equivalence, we need to do something more. So we take any specification, and then we take a system that's specialized with respect to two programs, P and P prime, and then we want to show that if the specialized system's SP satisfying phi is equivalent to SP prime satisfying phi. So we need to look at every possible specification and then see that if two specialized systems satisfy the same specification. But this is too hard. Like if we take arbitrary specification, it's just not feasible. So we usually focus on the simpler specification, which is typically like this. So this down arrow with curly brackets R means the termination with a result R. So we take any possible result and then see if two specialized systems produce the same result and terminate. Right. So we want to provide a mathematical proof of behavior equivalence, and then that will provide certification that two programs, or typically two versions of programs, behave the same. So it happens in like if you have a system, or if you have a software, like then sometimes you want to make it run faster by changing a bit of the software, and then a compiler does that all the time. And then you want to be sure that this kind of change to the software doesn't harm the overall performance or result. And then there are quite a few established proof methodologies for this kind of behavioral equivalence problems. And these are applicative assimilations and logical relations, and they are all using term rewriting systems. And then I came up with a radically new approach, which I would call local analysis, that uses graph rewriting systems instead. So I've got local analysis, which is like a research result. And then that comprised a half of my PhD thesis. And then we've got archive, like preprint in 2019, but it is yet to be published. That sounds already like weird, right? And then there has been quite a few hassles, and then this result has led to publication in 5 years. So finally this year I've got 2 papers published out of this result. So I want to talk through what are these hassles. So I learned how to carry research during my PhD study. So there was motivation. So behavioral equivalence is an important problem, and there are quite a few established proof methodologies, but these methodologies are fragile, so we want to make it robust. So that's the motivation. And then approach is to use graph rewriting systems instead of term rewriting systems that are usually used, that are widely used. And then we've got a result that is local analysis. And then that looks like a research, right? We've got motivation, approach, and a result. And then this result brings another motivation, which is like local analysis is radically new. It works, but it has a limitation. It has very wobbly mathematical foundation. So it was not clear how I can extend this approach to like wider class of programs, for example. So I've got motivation. So as limitations, the local analysis is only applicable to deterministic programs. That means programs with just one result. And then there's no clue to extend to non-deterministic programs, for example. And then I came up with an approach, was to use term rewriting systems that represent graph rewriting systems. So I have a graph rewriting system, and then there is a language for representing graphs using terms, like in this blue box. So we've got like 3 vertices, and plus node, times node, and the root, that kind of thing. But then I expected the result like local analysis with graphs represented as terms. So I wanted to kind of translate local analysis from graph rewriting to term rewriting. And then, but the problem was local analysis heavily exploits the graph notion of neighborhood, and then it doesn't translate into terms well. So this exposure was not really possible with graphs as terms approach. So this one fails, and then this approach fails. But this is approach 1, so there is approach 2. So another approach is to use automata instead of any rewriting systems. And so automata provides an abstraction of graph rewriting systems and term rewriting systems, so I don't need to bother with like rewriting and a graph notion of neighborhood, and I only play with abstract automata. And then I've got a result, which is called Q-constraint simulation. So if you know some automata theory, there is a notion of simulation to establish that 2 automata behaves like basically the same. So I extended the notion and then proposed a new notion of simulation that models imitation of behavior. And then it's a research carrying on, right? We've got a motivation, an approach, and a result, and then so we wrote a paper. And we submitted to a conference called FOSAX 2022, but it failed. So it wasn't accepted, it was rejected. And the reviewer said, like, this paper has enough technical materials, but it doesn't have a story, and we can't make sense of it. And then I was very confused because I thought I've got a story. I have a motivation and an approach and a result. Isn't that enough? And then, anyway, the approach kind of failed. It didn't lead to a publication. It was rejected. And then I've got the first approach failed. So, trouble. And then I struggled even more. So it was right in the middle of the pandemic. So the pandemic hit, I've got like basically like few people to talk to, which was really bad. And then I've got a mental health issue, and yeah, these things happen. So I used to be an assistant professor in Kyoto University here, and I've just recently moved. So, but as an assistant professor, I was treated as a very independent researcher. So I was supposed to do research on my own, but I was just like early career researcher, so I didn't quite know how to really conduct research. But there was a hint. So somebody told me, what is your work in a nutshell? Somebody asked me. And then I was like, well, I have this story, and I can't summarize it even more. But that person has a good point of view, and he said, you're trying to characterize program equivalence using automata, aren't you? So he said, he radically summarizes my work. And then I was like, maybe yes. And then this words made me think about this second approach. And actually, there's a problem that the approach is supposed to solve. So the problem is to characterize program equivalence or behavioral equivalence using automata. And then if I realize there's this problem, I can measure how this result is good or not. So the result is now become a solution to the problem. And then this might look a very little change, but this was a game changer. So I wrote a paper using this story. So there's a motivation that led to a problem, and we're trying to solve that problem. And then we provide a solution, which is which solves the problem to some extent. So then that led to a paper earlier this year. So it's been 5 years. and then I learned to find a problem, basically. So I tried to apply this new approach, new kind of attitude to the first approach that failed. So the first approach was to use term rewriting systems that represent graph rewriting systems, but this sounds really complicated, and then it can be simplified. So there was a hidden problem that is to do local analysis with term rewriting systems instead of graph rewriting systems. And in light of this problem, the first approach is very complicated and indirect. So there should be an approach that is to use term rewriting systems directly. That means take a program as a term directly, rather than representing a program as a graph and then representing that graph as a term. So by taking a short approach, there happened to be another motivation. So I wanted to use term rewriting systems as a systems that execute programs. But then there was a problem. The very basic notion of evaluation strategies was missing in term rewriting systems community. So I had to introduce this notion, and then to do that, the notion called evaluation context has to be introduced to term rewriting systems. So it became a problem. And then there was a solution, happily. So that solution came, I think it came at around 2023, but then it took 1 year to get published. So earlier this year, in May, this work finally got published. So I spent 5 years to get 2 papers published out of 1 result. So I think I've learned to not just to carry research, but to frame research. So how I thought of research is like this. I've got a motivation, an approach, and a result. And the motivation means why you care, you as the person who carries the research, why you care, and then how you tackle challenges, and then what you obtain is a result. But actually, I think how you should frame research is a bit different. So instead of motivation, approach, and result, you should have a problem. And then a motivation is now become why people should care instead of why just you cares. And then a problem is what your solution is for, and approach is how you tackle challenges, and the solution is not just what you get, but what you offer to the community of research. So the point is to take into account of your research community's perspective, just rather than just you saying, this is what I got, this is how I care. And then the second key point is to clarify what your solution can do and can't do in light of the problem that the solution is for. So once you find the right problem, you can measure your solution. So yeah, that's what I learned, and then that's kind of how I wish I knew this when when I started as a researcher after getting PhD. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you. So personally, the joy of doing research for me is to attend a conference, meet people, and talk to them. So publishing a paper is a way to get to the community, like the community venue. So it's publication is not just a goal, but something that you have to do if you want to go traveling. So, so that's my take. But at the same time, it's good to write up or write down what you've got and then tell people what you've got. So I kind of enjoy writing as well. So it's hard to make up this nice story, but once we got a story, it's kind of a joy to write down.
Thank you for your valuable talk. Now I'm doing PhD student, so I really impressed about your following work from your research. So it is my general question, but which thing do you think much more important from whether key 1 or key 2? Which one do you think much more important?
It's a difficult question. that's why I put 2 keys in parallel. But I think the second key is must when you want to, if you want to get your work published.
Thank you.
Yeah, because the second key provides readers of a paper to a way to make sense of your paper.
Thank you very much. Then kind of contribution or something is able but something is not able is important for publication or kind of outcome.
Yeah, as an outcome, so it's not enough to give people what you've got. You need to equip that with evaluation of what your solution can do, what it can't do, what is the limitation, what is the benefit of having that solution, etc.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the beautiful talk and insights. So as you mentioned also you enjoy writing papers, and I also listened to several tutorials and lectures how to write papers, and in one of them, a professor from Chicago University was saying, stop thinking about yourself and start thinking about your readers. So now, equipped with all these insights, if you can give advice to, let's say, PhD students, especially in verification field, how would you tackle writing?
I think take time to make up your story first, rather than diving into writing part. So you need sometimes it helps to think about what kind of presentation or slides you would make out of your work, your piece of work. Because with slides, you can do visual, illustration or whatever you want. And then if you go directly into writing, you're like stuck with just like basically strings. So you need to free up your mind, I think.
Hi. Really nice talk. So I had a question about the key insight one. You mentioned that you have to take into account the research community's perspective, and I couldn't agree more with you on this one. I've had cases where we submitted a paper to one conference in one sub-research community, and they hated it, and then you submit it at the other one, and you get like a best paper award. So I was wondering if you have any kind of tips for the on how to especially because when you have research that kind of spans multiple research communities, do you have any tips of kind of how to ramp up on the perspective of a specific research community, like how to get up to speed to understand what are the problems these people care about, how do they frame them and think about them?
It's a difficult question. I want to, if there is a definitive answer, I want to hear about the answer too. But my take is I have one experience of writing a paper that kind of appealed to two communities, and then one community hated it, and the other community liked it. Then writing that paper was difficult. So first I tried to appeal to both communities, but then after by rejection I learned that one community hates my work, I changed the writing to focus on the community that likes my work. So that was my experience. So you need to find the right community, I think. And then sometimes you learn that by getting rejection after rejection.
Hi. Thank you for your inspiring story and congratulations on your achievement this year. So I have two questions. The first one, let's go one by one then. So the first one, I see that you have passed through many problems, many trouble during the time until you get your first paper. So the first question is, how do you motivate yourself to keep working on the hope that you will get something, even especially during the COVID times?
Yeah. It was very hard, and then I lost one's confidence on my own, of myself. But I kind of kept. I was still kind of confident about the work itself and the results as they are. So I was confident that these results are interesting and new. So once I stopped believing myself, but I didn't stop believing in the results that I've got.
Okay, and the second question, so I see that you have changed your strategy in tackling with the problem. So how do you learn this thing? Anyone who asks for advice or in this situation, how do you suggest to solve the problem?
So I mentioned one hint, right, of summarizing my work. And then the person that gave me that hint was an advisor related to some research grant and research project. So on that project, I had to present my research every half a year, but I was very slow in progress. So I was struggling with how to make what I've done in the last 6 months looking good, but it was very difficult. So yeah, that occasion, getting an advisor was really helpful to me. And then also in the more later stage of this story, I really benefited from having collaborators.
Thank you for the great talk, and thank you for including the portion on mental health as well. I think that's always important to talk about. It sounds like you had kind of strong inspiration and support from this particular advisor figure that kind of helped push you forward. Where else did you find support in this community or otherwise?
like my supervisors in my master's and PhD studies, and collaborators. Yeah, I think collaborators like played a big role, because I couldn't firstly find people to talk to about research around me in my institution, because most people had mathematical background while I had a like computer science background. So one good thing about COVID was that it became very common to have an online meeting. So I could talk to people from like different parts of this country. So that was really like helpful.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, I think I have another question. That is, I think your research basically is pretty theoretical, as, if I understand correctly. So, how do you think? How important is it to connect to, let's say, when you convince people about your motivation? So, how important is it to connect your work to the real-world applications or industry needs?
It depends on the topic. So, if I appeal to a theoretical community, it may not be a must to consider a real-world problem, but it depends. What else can I say? Well, it is always good to have a real-world application, but it's sometimes very long shot. So, but it's good to acknowledge that it's a long shot, and you could also write that in your paper. So that you don't come up with like just a theoretician.
Yep. Yep. Other questions?
Thank you very much for your talk. I guess I don't know how to best formulate my question, but like when I'm doing things, it seems like a lot of these things sort of come at the same time. Like it's not as if you have like a well-defined problem all the time and then you have a well-defined approach, you have a well-defined solution in this sort of linear manner. Like how do you, if you could speak to sort of how you would balance these things as they come kind of at the same time? Like, did you find a good method to keep in mind a story while you're doing research, or this sort of problem? Yeah, just.
I think a motivation comes first, and then you try to do something about the motivation, and then for me, typically a result comes like next, and then after that, I start thinking about a story.
Then how to connect it.
Yeah, how to connect these papers, and then in that stage, you may find a like very related paper in the literature, for example.
And then you can kind of iterate and revise what you've done to connect better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, other questions? We still have time. Okay, if there is no, let's thank the speakers again.